For centuries, the galaxy had looked past Kepler 442b, a whisper of a habitable world, lost in the vastness, deemed too remote, too uninteresting for expansion. They called it forgotten, abandoned, a dust-blown memory of a failed dream. And for a long time, that's precisely what we wanted them to believe. Out here, amidst the whispering winds and the endless fields, Maya Chun had traded the clang of battle for the rhythm of the seasons. But peace, even one so meticulously cultivated, could not last forever. For even the most desolate garden can hold roots deeper than any outsider could ever comprehend, and sometimes the quietest places are merely waiting for a whisper of the enemy to awaken the deadliest of guardians. The forgotten colony, the morning sun cast long shadows across the wheat fields of Kepler 442b as Maya Chun knelt beside her irrigation system, adjusting the flow regulators with practiced precision. Her weathered hands moved with the confidence of someone who had spent 5 years turning barren soil into fertile farmland. The colony records listed her as the sole survivor of Settlement Omega-7, a failed agricultural venture that had supposedly collapsed due to crop disease and economic hardship. The records were wrong, but Maya preferred it that way. She stood slowly, brushing dirt from her work clothes, and gazed across the valley that had become her home. To any casual observer, the settlement looked exactly as the reports described, mostly abandoned, with only one stubborn farmer refusing to leave her land. The main administrative buildings stood empty, their windows dark and covered with dust. The landing pad was cracked and overgrown with native grasses. Even the communications array appeared to be functioning on emergency power, only sending out the automated distress beacon that had been broadcasting for 3 years. But Maya knew better. Beneath the carefully maintained facade of abandonment lay one of humanity's most sophisticated monitoring stations. The failed colony was actually a carefully orchestrated deception designed to observe and document the expanding Zephyrian Empire without drawing attention. Maya Chun wasn't just a farmer, she was a former military engineer, handpicked for this assignment because of her unique combination of technical expertise and agricultural knowledge. The Zephyrians had been expanding their territory for decades, conquering or assimilating dozens of species across 3 galactic arms. Their method was always the same: send scouts to identify valuable worlds, followed by negotiators who offered protection in exchange for submission. Species that refused were subjected to rehabilitation, a euphemistic term for cultural extinction and forced labor. Humanity had been watching from the shadows, documenting everything, waiting for the right moment to act. Kepler 442b was perfectly positioned along one of the Zephyrians' expansion routes, making it an ideal observation post. The planet's harsh winters and difficult growing conditions provided the perfect cover for a failed colony, ensuring that the Zephyrians would dismiss it as worthless. Maya walked back toward her farmhouse, a modest structure that looked humble from the outside, but contained some of the most advanced surveillance equipment in known space. Hidden beneath the root cellar lay quantum communication arrays that connected her to similar outposts across the galaxy. The barn concealed atmospheric processors and defensive systems that could turn the entire valley into an impregnable fortress within hours. As she reached the porch, a soft chime from her wrist communicator made her pause. The device looked like a simple farming tool, a soil analyzer that any agricultural worker might carry. But the signal it was receiving came from the network of sensor satellites that Maya had deployed throughout the system, disguised as space debris and defunct mining equipment. 3 objects had entered the outer system, moving on an intercept course with Kepler 442b. The sensor data showed them to be small, sleek vessels, typical Zephyrian scout probes. They would arrive within 48 hours, just as Maya had predicted they would. She had been preparing for this moment for 2 years, ever since the monitoring station had detected increased Zephyrian activity in nearby systems. The Empire was expanding again, and Kepler 442b lay directly in their path. Maya had used the time well, transforming her seemingly simple farm into an elaborate trap while maintaining the illusion of an isolated, struggling colonist. The Zephyrians would see exactly what she wanted them to see: a weak, defenseless human clinging to a worthless piece of land. They would investigate, perhaps send a small team to evaluate the planet's resources and eliminate any potential witnesses. They would discover that appearances could be deceiving. Maya walked into her house and descended the hidden stairs to the command center below. Banks of monitors displayed tactical information from across the galaxy, fed by a network of disguised observation posts like her own. She could see Zephyrian fleet movements, communication intercepts, and detailed analyses of their military capabilities. The Empire was powerful, but they had grown complacent in their dominance. They expected easy victories and quick conquests. They had never encountered organized human resistance before. Maya activated the quantum communicator and sent a coded message to the network. Visitors coming for dinner, setting the table. The response came back within minutes from monitoring stations across dozens of worlds. Understood. Watching with interest. She climbed back to the surface and spent the next hour making final preparations. The automated systems would handle most of the work, but Maya wanted to personally check every detail. The defensive perimeter was invisible, but complete: sensor webs, barrier generators, and precision targeting systems, all disguised as farming equipment. The irrigation channels could be flooded with various compounds, from sedatives to more lethal substances, depending on the threat level. Most importantly, the entire farm was one giant recording device. Every conversation, every action, every tactical decision would be documented and transmitted to the network. The Zephyrians would provide intelligence about their methods, technology, and weaknesses, all while thinking they were dealing with a helpless human farmer. As evening approached, Maya sat on her porch with a cup of synthetic coffee, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and purples. To any observer, she looked like a lonely colonist contemplating another quiet night on an empty world. But her eyes tracked the subtle movement of her hidden sensor drones, and her enhanced hearing picked up the whisper-quiet hum of charging defensive systems. The Zephyrian probes would arrive tomorrow, and with them would come Maya's opportunity to send a message that would echo across the galaxy. The Empire had grown used to easy conquests and unopposed expansion. They believed that isolated humans were helpless victims, ready to be subjugated or eliminated without resistance. Maya Chun was about to teach them otherwise. She finished her coffee and went inside to prepare for bed, but not before activating the final layer of her defensive preparations. Tomorrow would bring visitors, and Maya intended to give them a proper human welcome, one they would remember for the rest of their very short lives. The seemingly abandoned colony settled into darkness, but beneath the surface, sophisticated systems hummed with readiness. The trap was set, the bait was in place, and the hunter was ready. Maya Chun had spent 5 years becoming the perfect farmer, but she had never stopped being a soldier. The Zephyrians were about to learn that humanity's greatest weapon wasn't technology or numbers, it was patience and the ability to appear weak while preparing to strike. The Empire had conquered dozens of species by exploiting their fear and desperation, but they had never fought farmers before. The Hunter's Gambit, the Zephyrian Scout probes, arrived exactly when Maya's calculations predicted they would, descending through Kepler 442b's atmosphere like silver teardrops against the morning sky. Maya watched from her kitchen window as the 3 vessels conducted their initial survey, their scanning beams sweeping across the abandoned colony buildings with methodical precision. She continued preparing breakfast, eggs from her chickens and bread from her own wheat, acting the part of an oblivious farmer going about her daily routine, but her enhanced contact lenses displayed tactical data from the hidden sensor network, tracking every movement of the alien craft. The probes were highly advanced, equipped with full-spectrum analyzers and quantum communication arrays. More importantly, they carried life sign detectors sensitive enough to count individual heartbeats. The lead probe hovered over the main colony administration building for several minutes before moving on to survey the agricultural areas. Maya knew they were building a comprehensive picture of the settlement, population count, technology, level, defensive capabilities, resource value. What they found would determine whether Kepler 442b received a diplomatic contact or something more aggressive. Maya stepped onto her porch and waved cheerfully at the nearest probe, maintaining her cover as a simple farmer curious about unusual visitors. The probe's sensors focused on her briefly before continuing its survey pattern. She could almost feel the alien intelligence behind those instruments analyzing her, categorizing her as harmless. 3 hours later, the probes departed as suddenly as they had arrived, leaving no trace except the detailed scan data they transmitted to their command ship lurking in the outer system. Maya waited until her sensors confirmed they were gone before activating her quantum communicator. The response from the network came within minutes, and it wasn't good news. The probe scan data had been intercepted and analyzed. The Zephyrians had detected human technology signatures despite Maya's careful camouflage efforts. More concerning, they had identified biosignatures indicating a larger population than the single farmer they observed. Maya wasn't surprised. The Zephyrians hadn't conquered half the galaxy by being careless. Their scouts were thorough, and their commanders were experienced at detecting deception. But Maya had planned for this contingency. Sometimes the best way to hide the truth was to reveal a smaller lie. 2 days later, the Real hunters arrived. Maya was tending her vegetable garden when the atmospheric disturbance announced their approach. Unlike the obvious scout probes, these ships descended under stealth fields that bent light around their hulls. Only Maya's quantum sensors detected their presence as they landed in the forest beyond her fields. She counted 5 vessels, each carrying a team of Zephyrian shadow hunters, the Empire's elite infiltration specialists. These weren't scouts or diplomats. They were assassins sent to eliminate potential threats before they could become problems. The fact that they had come in force told Maya everything she needed to know about how seriously the Zephyrians took even minor deceptions. Maya continued her gardening, but her fingers moved in subtle patterns that activated hidden systems throughout the farm. The irrigation network began cycling different chemical compounds through the soil. The greenhouse ventilation system started dispersing airborne nanobots programmed to attach to Zephyrian biosignatures. Most importantly, the entire farm's recording systems switched to maximum sensitivity. The shadow hunters were professionals, and they took their time. Maya's sensors tracked them as they established a perimeter around the farm, moving with the fluid grace of apex predators. Their equipment was impressive: adaptive camouflage suits, multi-spectrum sensors, weapons that could kill silently from impossible distances, but they had never hunted a human engineer with 5 years to prepare her battlefield. The first hunter approached the farmhouse just after sunset, moving through Maya's wheat field with perfect stealth. His suit adapted to match the golden stalks, making him nearly invisible to normal senses. But Maya's sensor network had been tracking his heat signature, electromagnetic emissions, and even the minute pressure changes his footsteps created in the carefully prepared soil. Maya sat on her porch, reading a book by lamplight, playing the part of an evening routine she had practiced 1,000 times. The hunter crept closer, his weapon trained on her position, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. He never realized that he was walking through a carefully choreographed death trap. Maya turned a page in her book, and the movement triggered a pressure release in the irrigation system. A fine mist began rising from the wheat field, almost invisible in the growing darkness. The hunter noticed it too late. The mist contained a cocktail of compounds designed specifically for Zephyrian physiology: sleep inducers, muscle relaxants, and cognitive disruptors. Within seconds, the elite assassin collapsed into the wheat, his advanced suit and weapons useless against an attack he never saw coming. The second hunter was more cautious, approaching from the barn where Maya stored her farming equipment. He had studied the first hunter's failure and adjusted his tactics accordingly, using breathing apparatus and sealed environmental systems to protect against airborne threats. Maya was ready for him too. The barn's automated systems detected his approach and began a subtle electromagnetic pulse sequence, one that matched the natural background radiation from Kepler 442b's twin moons. To the hunter's sensors, it looked like normal environmental interference. But the pulse was specifically tuned to disrupt Zephyrian neural implants, the cybernetic enhancements that gave shadow hunters their superhuman reflexes and coordination. The hunter made it halfway across the barn before his enhanced nervous system began receiving contradictory signals. His muscles locked up as his implants fought against each other, and he collapsed among Maya's farming tools, paralyzed but conscious. Maya continued reading her book, but she could feel the remaining 3 hunters reassessing their situation. They had expected to eliminate a simple farmer and maybe a few hidden colonists. Instead, they had walked into a sophisticated trap that neutralized their most elite operatives without Maya even standing up from her chair. The 3rd hunter tried a direct approach, abandoning stealth for speed and overwhelming firepower. He burst from the forest line, weapon charged, and ready to vaporize the entire farmhouse if necessary. Maya finally looked up from her book as emergency lights illuminated the yard. The hunter found himself face to face with what appeared to be an automated defense turret that had risen from beneath the porch. But Maya knew better. It was actually a modified grain thresher equipped with targeting systems and loaded with projectiles made from compressed agricultural waste. The irony wasn't lost on her as the turret fired, launching a barrage of hardened wheat husks at velocities that turned them into armor-piercing rounds. The hunter's shields held for exactly 3 seconds before failing, and he joined his companions in unconsciousness. The remaining 2 hunters withdrew to their ships, and Maya finally stood up from her chair. She walked calmly into her house and descended to the command center, where she activated the quantum communicator once again. Her message to the network was simple. Dinner guests have arrived. They seem to have lost their appetites. But Maya knew this was only the beginning. The Shadow Hunters' failure would be reported back to their commanders, and the Zephyrians would escalate their response. Next time, they would send more than assassins. Maya was counting on it. She spent the rest of the night preparing for Phase 2 of her plan, while her unconscious guests remained scattered around the farm like scarecrows in a field of consequences. The Empire had sent their best hunters to eliminate a simple farmer. Tomorrow, they would learn what happened when farmers started hunting back. The Garden of Bones Maya, Chin stood in her greenhouse at dawn, examining the exotic plants that grew in carefully controlled environments behind walls of reinforced transparent aluminum. To any observer, it appeared to be a simple agricultural facility where she experimented with non-native crops. The reality was far more complex and considerably more deadly. Each plant had been genetically modified for specific defensive purposes. The flowering vines along the eastern wall produced airborne toxins lethal to Zephyrian respiratory systems. The root vegetables in the center beds contained concentrated alkaloids that could be weaponized through the irrigation system. Even the decorative moss covering the floor could release spores programmed to attack specific alien physiologies. But Maya's most prized creation was the garden's centerpiece, a beautiful flowering tree that appeared to be purely ornamental. Its branches reached toward the glass ceiling, covered in delicate blossoms that released a sweet fragrance into the air. The tree was actually a sophisticated biological weapon, capable of analyzing alien DNA through airborne particles and producing targeted pathogens within hours. Maya had spent 3 years perfecting her garden of death, disguising genocide as gardening. She checked her risk communicator and confirmed that the 5 shadow hunters remained unconscious where they had fallen. Her chemical cocktails had been precisely calibrated to keep them alive but incapacitated, providing her with valuable intelligence assets while she waited for the Zephyrian response. The response came sooner than expected. Maya's sensor network detected the incoming ships while she was watering her tomatoes. Not the stealthy infiltration craft of the Shadow Hunters, but a full military transport accompanied by 3 escort fighters. The Zephyrians had escalated quickly, abandoning subtlety in favor of overwhelming force. Maya smiled as she set down her watering can. She had hoped they would make exactly this mistake. The lead transport landed in the abandoned colony's main square, its engines scorching the overgrown landing pad as armored figures emerged in formation. Through her enhanced contact lenses, Maya identified the insignia of the Zephyrian Royal Guard, elite soldiers who served as the Emperor's personal enforcement arm. Their commander wore the crimson armor of a war master, indicating that this was no longer a simple scouting mission. Maya activated her quantum communicator and sent a coded message to the network. Formal dinner party has begun. Rolling out the red carpet, The response was immediate and coordinated. Across the galaxy, other monitoring stations began implementing Phase 2 of the operation. The Zephyrians were about to discover that Kepler 442b wasn't an isolated target. It was the center of a web that stretched across dozens of star systems. But first, Maya had to deal with her immediate guests. The Royal Guard advanced through the colony in perfect formation, their weapons sweeping methodically as they cleared each building. Maya watched their progress through hidden cameras, noting their tactics and equipment specifications. These soldiers were more disciplined than the Shadow Hunters, with better armor and superior coordination. They were also walking into a trap 3 years in the making. Maya had spent considerable time studying Zephyrian military doctrine, and she knew they would establish a command post in the colony's main administration building. The structure offered elevated position, multiple exit routes, and housing for their communication equipment. It was the tactically obvious choice that IT was also where Maya had placed her most sophisticated surprise. The War Master's team swept the building efficiently, checking for threats and securing the perimeter before establishing their equipment. Maya waited until they were fully committed to the position before activating the building's hidden systems. The administration complex had been gutted and rebuilt according to Maya's specifications, though it appeared unchanged from the outside. The walls contained a network of microfabricators capable of producing custom chemical compounds on demand. The ventilation system could deliver precise atmospheric mixtures to specific rooms. Most importantly, the entire structure was equipped with gravity manipulation technology that Maya had liberated from a derelict alien research station. Maya watched through her surveillance feeds as the Zephyrian soldiers began experiencing equipment malfunctions. Their weapons became inexplicably heavy, their armor systems reported false readings, and their communication equipment started generating interference patterns that disrupted their cybernetic implants. The War Master was the first to realize they were under attack, but by then it was too late. Maya had spent years studying Zephyrian physiology and psychology, learning their weaknesses and exploiting their overconfidence. The Royal Guard was trapped in a building that had become a sophisticated torture chamber designed to incapacitate without killing. Maya needed them alive for Phase 3, that while the Royal Guard struggled with her building-sized mousetrap, Maya dealt with their escort fighters. The 3 aircraft had remained in atmospheric patrol, maintaining overwatch of the colony. Their pilots were experienced and cautious, staying at high altitude where ground-based weapons couldn't reach them. But Maya wasn't using ground-based weapons. Hidden throughout the colony were devices that appeared to be simple atmospheric processors designed to maintain breathable air in the abandoned settlement. In reality, they were orbital defense platforms capable of generating focused energy beams that could reach low orbit. Maya had disguised them as essential life support equipment, making them invisible to tactical scans. The first fighter pilot never saw the attack coming. A precisely targeted energy beam struck his engines with surgical precision, causing catastrophic failure without destroying the aircraft. The pilot ejected safely, his escape pod drifting down toward Maya's carefully prepared landing zone. The second and third fighters tried to escape, but Maya's network of hidden platforms created an overlapping field of fire that covered the entire atmospheric envelope. Both aircraft were disabled within minutes, their pilots joining their comrade in forced landings around the colony. Maya walked calmly through her farmyard, collecting the unconscious pilots as she had gathered eggs that morning. Each one was fitted with a tracking device and placed in one of her modified storage buildings, where life support systems would keep them healthy while chemical restraints kept them docile. By midday, Maya had captured an entire Zephyrian strike force without firing a single shot in anger. Her farm now housed 8 elite alien soldiers, all alive and available for intelligence gathering. More importantly, their disappearance would send a clear message to the Zephyrian command structure. Maya returned to her greenhouse and activated her most sophisticated communication system, a quantum entanglement network that connected her directly to Earth's strategic command. The connection was instantaneous and undetectable, allowing her to speak directly with the human leadership 1,300 light-years away. The conversation was brief but significant. Maya provided her intelligence assessments and tactical recommendations, while Earth confirmed that other monitoring stations were reporting similar success. The Zephyrian Empire was discovering that their expansion had been watched, documented, and carefully prepared for. Phase 3 was approved unanimously. Maya walked back to her porch and sat down with a cup of tea, watching the sun set over her valley. Tomorrow would bring new challenges as the Zephyrians escalated their response to the loss of their royal guard. But Maya was ready for whatever came next. Her garden was blooming beautifully, and she had plenty of fertilizer. The scattered equipment and weapons of the failed assault force would provide valuable intelligence about Zephyrian technology. The captured soldiers would reveal tactical information under carefully controlled interrogation. Most importantly, the psychological impact of this defeat would ripple through the Zephyrian command structure, creating doubt and paranoia where confidence had once existed. Maya Chun had spent 5 years appearing to be a simple farmer on a forgotten world, but she was actually something far more dangerous, a human who had been given time to prepare, resources to work with, and a very good reason to be patient. The Zephyrian Empire was about to learn that humanity's greatest strength wasn't their technology or their numbers. It was their ability to plan for the long term, to sacrifice immediate gratification for strategic advantage, and to turn apparent weakness into devastating strength. Maya finished her tea and went inside to tend her prisoners. Tomorrow would bring new visitors, and she wanted to ensure her guests were comfortable for what was coming next. The Garden of Bones was finally ready for harvest. The Emperor's Wrath Emperor, Vexthul of the Zephyrian Empire, stood before the massive viewing screen in his throne chamber, watching the tactical display that showed the complete failure of his forces on Kepler 442b. The loss of 5 Shadow Hunters had been concerning. The destruction of an entire Royal Guard unit was unthinkable. The Emperor's scaled hide rippled with suppressed rage as he processed the reports from his surviving commanders. A single human farmer had neutralized his most elite forces without suffering a single casualty. Worse, the captured soldiers were alive, meaning the humans now possessed detailed intelligence about Zephyrian military capabilities. General Karath, the Emperor's most trusted military advisor, stood at attention beside the throne. The massive warrior had served the Empire for 3 decades, conquering 17 star systems and subjugating 43 different species. He had never encountered anything like the tactical disaster unfolding on Kepler 442b. "Explain to me," the Emperor said, his voice carrying the deadly calm that preceded his most violent rages, "how a single human defeated an entire strike force equipped with our most advanced technology." Karatha's mandibles clicked nervously as he consulted his tactical pad. "The human appears to have been preparing for our arrival for several years, my Emperor. The entire colony is a sophisticated trap designed to appear abandoned while concealing advanced defensive systems." One human, Vexthul repeated, his claws extending slightly from their sheaths. One farmer. "The intelligence suggests she may not be merely a farmer, Emperor. Her tactical knowledge and technical capabilities indicate military training, possibly Special Forces background. More concerning, our communications intercepts suggest she is in contact with other human installations across multiple star systems." The Emperor's eyes narrowed to slits. The Zephyrian Empire had expanded across the galaxy by exploiting the isolation and technological inferiority of primitive species. They conquered worlds by attacking isolated settlements, preventing any coordinated resistance. If the humans had established a network of hidden monitoring stations, it changed everything. "Show me the intercepts," Vexthul commanded. The viewing screen shifted to display quantum communication patterns detected across 17 different star systems. Each pattern indicated the presence of advanced human technology in locations that official records listed as uninhabited or abandoned. The implications were staggering. "They have been watching us," the Emperor said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "For how long?" "Unknown, my Emperor. But our xenoarchaeology teams have detected similar energy signatures at sites we conquered up to 15 years ago. The humans may have been documenting our expansion from the beginning." Emperor Vexthul rose from his throne, his massive form casting shadows across the chamber. The revelation that his empire had been under surveillance for decades filled him with a cold fury unlike anything he had experienced before. Every conquest, every strategic decision, every military innovation had potentially been observed and analyzed by human intelligence. What do we know about this Maya-Chun? He demanded. General Karaf activated a holographic display showing Maya's public records. According to galactic databases, she is a former military engineer who participated in several colonial development projects. Her psychological profile indicates high intelligence, strong survival instincts, and exceptional patience. She appears to have volunteered for the Kepler 442b assignment. Volunteered, the Emperor repeated. She chose to isolate herself on a worthless planet for 5 years, waiting for us to arrive. The tactical implications are significant, my Emperor. If the humans have been preparing for our expansion, they may have developed countermeasures for our standard conquest protocols. Vexthul began pacing, his mind racing through the strategic possibilities. The Zephyrian Empire controlled thousands of worlds and commanded fleets that could devastate entire star systems. But their power was built on the assumption that they faced primitive, disorganized resistance. If humanity had been preparing for war, while maintaining the illusion of weakness, the balance of power might be very different than it appeared. Summon the War Council, the Emperor commanded. I want our best tactical minds analyzing every aspect of the situation, and prepare the Crimson Fleet for immediate deployment. General Karatha's expression showed surprise. The entire Crimson Fleet, my Emperor? To deal with one human? To deal with what that human represents, Vexthul corrected. If the humans have been preparing for war while we believe them to be scattered primitives, then we are facing a deception of unprecedented scale. I will not allow this infection to spread. Within hours, the Emperor's war chamber filled with his most experienced commanders, intelligence analysts, and strategic planners. The massive holographic display showed tactical assessments of human colonies across dozens of star systems, highlighting potential threats and defensive capabilities. Admiral Zextar, commander of the Crimson Fleet, studied the data with growing concern. If these intelligence estimates are accurate, my Emperor, the humans have established a network of fortified positions along our primary expansion routes. They could monitor our fleet movements and coordinate defensive responses across multiple sectors. More than that, added Intelligence Director Velmoff, her cybernetic implants glowing as she accessed classified databases. Our analysis of the Kepler 442b incident suggests the humans possess technology we have never encountered: gravity manipulation, biological weapons, quantum communication networks, all disguised as primitive agricultural equipment. Emperor Vexthul studied the tactical projections, his strategic mind calculating possibilities and probabilities. The humans had achieved something no other species had managed. They had remained hidden while building a sophisticated intelligence network. They had studied Zephyrian tactics and technology, developing specific countermeasures while maintaining the illusion of helplessness. What are our options? He demanded. General Karaf activated a series of attack scenarios. We could launch immediate strikes against all suspected human monitoring stations, attempting to destroy their network before they can coordinate a response. Alternatively, we could attempt to negotiate, offering them client status within the Empire in exchange for their surrender. Or, Admiral Zextar added grimly, we could withdraw from human space entirely and focus our expansion in other directions. The suggestion of retreat sent a ripple of shock through the war chamber. The Zephyrian Empire had never withdrawn from any conquest, never acknowledged any species as an equal threat. But the tactical reality was becoming increasingly clear. Humanity had prepared for this war in ways that challenged every assumption about primitive species. Emperor Vexthul stood in silence for long minutes, weighing his options. The Empire's reputation was built on swift, decisive victories against inferior opponents. Any sign of weakness or hesitation could encourage rebellion among conquered species and inspire resistance from future targets. But Maya Chun had demonstrated that humanity was not weak, and their apparent primitiveness was an elaborate deception. The question was whether the Emperor could adapt his strategy quickly enough to counter their preparations. Contact the human, Vexthul, decided finally, I want to speak with this Maya Chun directly. The War Council exchanged uncertain glances. Direct communication with enemy commanders was unprecedented in Zephyrian military doctrine. But the Emperor had recognized something his advisors were still struggling to accept. They were no longer dealing with a typical conquest scenario. My Emperor, General Karath said carefully, what do you intend to say to her? Vexthul's eyes gleamed with cold calculation. I intend to discover exactly how much she knows and what she wants. If the humans have been preparing for war, they must have an endgame in mind. I need to understand their objectives before I decide how to destroy them. The Emperor returned to his throne and activated the long-range communication array. The signal would take hours to reach Kepler 442b, but he was confident that Maya Chun would be waiting. After all, she had been waiting for 5 years. As the transmission began, Emperor Vexthul found himself facing an unprecedented situation. For the first time in his reign, he was dealing with an enemy who had chosen the time and place of their confrontation, who had prepared for years while maintaining perfect deception. The farmer on Kepler 442b had outmaneuvered the greatest military mind in the galaxy, and now she held 8 of his elite soldiers as prisoners. Vexthul intended to discover whether she was a tactical genius or simply the opening move in a much larger game. Either way, the Zephyrian Empire would never be the same.